Thank you so much, Patsy. I'm really excited to be here with everybody. We're going to be talking today about benefits of language and accent diversity among ABE teachers and volunteers. My name is Andrea Echelberger, and I am the ESL training coordinator with Literacy Minnesota. And I am joined by my colleague, Justyna. Justyna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Justyna Sparrow, and I currently teach at Hub Center, and I originally came from Poland over 8 years ago, and I enjoy to be an English teacher here.
And this is the first time Justyna and I have presented this session together. I'm assuming it's probably not going to be the last. It's been an absolute joy to work together. We've had a lot of fun with it. So getting us kicked off, just want everybody to pause for a moment and reflect on this quote. English is not a possession which native speakers lease out to others. Other people actually own it. So we're going to be talking about this concept of everybody kind of owning English, no matter what accent or language background they come from, and no matter what level of proficiency they have, in the context of adult basic education, in particular, teachers and volunteers in adult basic education. And just to show a quick visual, so English is still the most used language in the world, so the most commonly spoken language in the world. However, it is the most commonly spoken language because there are so many lingua franca speakers, as opposed to mother tongue speakers, people who grow up speaking it as a native language. You can see there's almost 3 times as many people who speak English as an acquired language, as opposed to English as a native language that they are born into. So just kind of want to acknowledge that and have people pause and think about that, and think about that idea that, you know, anyone who speaks English owns the language. It doesn't just belong to people who were born in specific countries and grew up speaking it. And we have a couple of common terms that we want to be able to make people familiar with and concepts to be thinking about as we are going through our slides. The first one is NES or NESTS and NNEST&Vs. So you're going to see this, we will say it out loud. We'll say native English speaking teacher and non-native English speaking teachers, but on our slides, you're going to see these acronyms because it takes up a lot less space, and this is how it's commonly referred to. People who are native speakers and non-native English speaking teachers are commonly referred to in the research and the literature. Another concept to be holding and keeping in mind is the concept of native speakerism. And this is what we are hoping to be pushing back against during our session today. And it's that the ideology that native speakers are better language teachers. So again, native speakerism can be applied in a wide variety of contexts. For the purpose of our session today, we're going to be talking about it in the context of language teachers, and particularly adult language teachers. And then the third concept that we would like everybody to be thinking about and focusing on is the standard language ideology. And that is the belief that the dialect with the highest social prestige is also the only valid form of the language. So again, something that we're hoping to push back against during our session today. And so one thing that we want to mention as we are getting kicked off is the idea that when we're talking about native English speaking teachers and volunteers and non-native English speaking teachers and volunteers, what we are not talking about is either or, one or the other. But what we're talking about is the concept of both and that every teacher, no matter what their language background, is going to have different strengths that they bring to teaching. And we really want to emphasize that what we're saying today is not that one is better than the other. And that speakers from teachers from both groups, non-native English speaking teachers and native English speaking teachers, can have the same strength as the other. So the goal of this presentation, what we're really hoping people will walk away with it from, is to encourage people to really actively reflect upon what unconscious bias that we might have around non-native English speakers as language teachers, and start to, once we're aware of them, then start to challenge some of those unconscious assumptions that we may carry with us, and be able to challenge it when we hear it arising in colleagues and administrators and with our learners. And Justyna, want to invite you to add your thoughts on this.
Yes, of course. So from what I have observed while volunteering and also working as a teacher is that it works really well both for the students and for the team of teachers to have both native English speaking teachers and non-native English speakers.
Fabulous. All right. So now that we've kind of laid down our foundation, what we'd like to talk about are some of the advantages of non-native English speaking teachers and volunteers. And these advantages are drawn from personal experience, but also drawn from a variety of research resources and research sources. So the first one that we are going to talk about is empathy. So I'm going to begin by unpacking what the research says, and then hand it over to Justyna to talk about her personal experiences as a teacher, as a non-native English speaking teacher, and also what she has learned from her learners. And during this section, when we're looking at advantages, you're also going to be hearing from 3 different learners from English classes talking about their thoughts on this topic. So thinking about empathy, having learned English, a non-native English speaking teacher and volunteer might be better able to, first off, set realistic goals for language learning. Secondly, understand learners' struggles and be able to put themselves with ease into learners' shoes without having it be theoretical, actually having gone through the experience themselves. And we know that that's really one of the best ways to develop empathy. And then the third advantage is that non-native English speaking teachers and volunteers may be able to adapt their language as needed to be more easily understood with different levels of English competency. And again, being able to draw from their own previous experiences and then apply it directly into the classroom. Right, Justyna?
Yes, so first I would like to emphasize the word might is the right word here, because it doesn't mean that it happens in every case and every time, but the non-native English speaking teacher might be better able to help understand English. Since I have learned English myself, I feel like I can compare English to other languages, how other languages work. And so that puts me in a position where I have the experience of breaking some things out for the students, and I can help them understand some tricky grammar that maybe native English speaking teachers don't notice every time, or some confusing things to the students. And I've heard some students tell me that it's easier for them, especially when they're beginners, to understand non-native English speaking teacher. So we will have, we'll watch a video right now actually of a student who is sharing her experience about when she was a beginning student. She would talk about some characteristics of teachers that helped her learn English when she was a beginner. So we'll just try to listen for the characteristics of non-native English speaking teacher that she will be talking about.
And just to apologize in advance, unfortunately, we weren't able to activate the subtitles for these videos. So want to give a huge shout out and appreciation to Janae, who's going to be interpreting through the videos for us.
My name is Sparrow, and I came to US in 2008 with very little understanding in English. So I started learning English at ESL school right away. Then I passed all the English class and a proficiency exam before I go into college in 2009. Thinking back my journey back then and how I was struggling with learning and also speaking English, one thing I want to point it out how important for all the ESL teachers to set up a basic foundation for immigrant students like me who want at least understanding and being able to speak in English, prepare for the next level, either in career advance or education. You know, it's really, I'm so glad, so thankful that I had my ESL teacher there for me to set up the basic foundation, what I need. And I also remember it was much easier for me to understand non-English speaker better than native English speaker. I think most part due to non-English speaker make the sentence much simplified in a proper way, and I don't really use a lot of slang or a big vocabulary due to the conversation. You know, to me, it's very important for me to understand the basic vocabulary in the bigger one, more technical one. So because whenever you're speaking to me and I have to translate in Chinese, then translate it back. So if I don't understand the bigger vocabulary, then I won't able to translate, then I would stop their learning for a moment, you know. So I think that's probably made a difference why I was able to understand and learning quicker and without much struggling. And also main thing, and another thing is I think we all came from a similar background and they understand how we have been struggling and probably just take a step back, say, hey, those are English students. No, sorry, this is our immigrant students, so maybe we should just take slow pace, you know, not intentionally, like when I'm not saying like English speaker, they speak fast, but probably they don't really know they speak fast because this is their language, their first language.
All right, well, now that we had a chance to hear from a learner, talking about those advantages that she personally experienced as a beginning English learner with non-native English speaking teachers, and how that applied to her ability to understand and that empathy building. We're going to move on to our next advantage, which is provide a strong learner model. So looking at the research, we know that as a model of a language learner, a non-native English speaking teacher has a few things going for them. Number one, they have learned at least one additional language. So they have had the experience of being a learner and being a language learner in particular. And that means they're able to teach language learning strategies and provide concrete, hands-on advice drawn from their own experiences. And something to really lift up is how much this can be a source of motivation for learners to know that their teacher started out where they started and was able to build up their skills to the point where they are able to be standing in front of the classroom. And that is just so incredibly critically important, especially trying to break down that myth that English only is the property of people who were born speaking it. All right, Justyna.
Yes, so an interesting thing that I experience is that students are usually very surprised when I tell them that English is my second language. And they tell me, wow, we wouldn't know if you didn't tell us. So it's for them, it's pretty much, it's just English. They don't really, they cannot really see a difference. They can tell a difference between English speaking teacher and a non-English speaking teacher. And I think for them, it's just hard to believe that someone can learn English as an adult well enough to be able to teach others, or well enough to speak at the level that they will not even see the difference or hear the difference in pronunciation. So for them, this is something new to experience, something that gives them the motivation that they actually maybe can learn English as well to that level. So we are going right now to watch another video that will be an interview with a student who will talk about how having a teacher who is a non-native English speaking teacher, how that impacted her learning and her goals.
I didn't know that the English was your first language.
That was my first language, yeah.
Yes, I didn't know. You told us last time. That's why I know, because I didn't see any difference. You talk perfectly. Everything is okay. You just have to tell somebody that English is your second language. Yes. So I can learn. I learn from you. That's it.
Okay.
Yes, I learned a lot, and yes, I didn't see it. It's okay.
Yeah. Thank you. So Mimi, what do you think? Do you think are there any benefits of teachers who learn English themselves?
Yes.
Yeah, what would they be?
Like I said, hey, how can I say that? Like I said, people who learn English by themselves had the benefit. Like you will not know that they how how can I say, they speak like English people. That's the benefits. I don't know how to explain, but simply like this, they have a lot. You have to find it. Yeah.
So that gives you hope. Is that what you mean? Like you can also learn English and
Yes.
speak well?
Yes. Yeah. And that's the way I'm going. To the same way. Yes. And I know that very few moments I will be like yes, like people whose first language is English. Yes.
That's very good, Mimi.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So it gives you hope that you can learn English as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and move on to our third advantage from the research, which is awareness of the target language, awareness of the language. So in this case, we're talking about, today we're talking about English. But having learned English, a non-native English speaking teacher or volunteer might be able to, first and foremost, supply more explicit knowledge about the English language, including grammar, pronunciation, and lexis. So some of those things that, someone who's a native English speaker might just take for granted. This is just the way that the language works. Somebody who has learned it has actually worked through it and knows the rules and knows the tricks. And this also enables people to maybe be able to better anticipate challenges and prevent difficulties before they happen. Because again, having learned the language themselves, somebody can know, this is a non-native speaker. This is what really caught me up. And this is what I struggled with. This is what didn't make sense to me. And then finally, someone might be able to provide effective and targeted error correction. Again, having gone through their process themselves, receive their own targeted error correction based on English. And Justyna?
Yeah, so sometimes I hear students say things like, "Teacher, you explain it so easy." And some of them will add, maybe because you learned it yourself. And I think there is something in that for sure. I think that because I went through the process myself, I had to figure out, when I was learning English, I had to figure out how to explain some things to myself that didn't really make sense in my first language. And so since I have done it, I can now lead others in this process.
All right, and that moves us on to our fourth advantage from the research, which is the value of accent exposure. Knowing that we live in a state, we live in a country, we watch media where there are different accents that are being used constantly. So few, we don't live in a monolingual state, and we don't live and work and interact in a monolingual culture, which means being able to understand different accents is an incredibly valuable skill that people are going to be able to apply in, their schools, their children's schools, jobs, etc. And so I'm going to hand it over to Justyna to talk about her experience with this and also to set up our final video.
Yes, I remember when I started working full-time as an ESL teacher here, I remember that I was concerned myself about how my accent can impact the students. And I was talking to a colleague saying, "Oh man, we will have all these Somali students here speaking with Polish accent." And she just laughed at me and was like, "Justyna, don't worry about it. Like, there's so many accents out there. Like, the students need to be exposed to them," which gave me a little bit more peace. I was like, okay, I'll just do what I can. Yeah, so it's really, it's like it's our world, here people speak with different accents. And we'll watch another video right now of actually interview with another student of mine who will talk about how the exposure to other accents and other cultures impacts her learning.
For that is when I first started English, I might prefer the original speaker English. But still, like now I cannot know English better a little bit now. I think both is good. They have their own good benefit. The original teacher is good. That the one thing that they're really helping is when you're speaking, or they can hold your accent. That's better, right? So that's a very good one. And for the second language teacher, it's really good that when you hear other teacher that don't not English speaker, and you can understand that teacher without the accent. The accent is not very strong at the original, but you can understand that teacher. That is something that very helpful for myself, that I can understand this teacher. Doesn't mean when I go out, I understand other people with not just the original teacher speaker. So that's nice.
So you learn how to understand other accents
Yes.
as well?
Yes, I love to hear or understand other accents too. Yeah, that's so nice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it's some benefit that there are. For me, the thing that I think is good for me that is like when they come from another country, they teaching they have something is like very different from the teacher. Like the experience or thing that they teach is a little bit different. I'm not sure how to explain, but yeah, there's the benefit and there is like when they there's not in this country, but they come teach they have like a thing that from this different from this country. It teach you something that you can learn from like some teacher here they don't know. So yes.
All right, so we just want to summarize and wrap up this section with what can we take away from the research and then from the learner experiences. So I'm going to hand it over to Justyna to talk about our top takeaways.
Yeah, so actually this is very interesting that what I found out is that about 95% of students can't even tell the difference between native English speaking teachers and non-native English speaking teachers. So I remember just a few years ago, I couldn't tell a difference between American speaker and Canadian speaker, for example. To me, it was just English. So I feel like it's pretty common for an English learner to treat English as a language, as a foreign language that you're learning, and you're not so much focused on the pronunciation. You're so much focused on the exact pronunciation or a little different sounds. You just focus on grammar, vocabulary, sentence structure, and so that comes a little later, I think. So when students are more proficient, and even among my advanced students, they still couldn't really tell the difference of my English compared to my colleagues' English. To them, it's just English. So also what I have found out was that while teaching and volunteering is that the students really, what they need is the atmosphere of acceptance, understanding. It's not so much about proficiency of the teacher. If it doesn't matter so much to them. Of course, it's important for the teacher to speak properly, with correct grammar, but it's not what matters the most to them. For them, when they're learning English or language, they just want to be understood. They need to know that the teacher can understand the struggles that they're dealing with, and they are accepted and they are supported by the teacher. So the atmosphere actually for them is more important than the proficiency of the teacher.
All right, so you've had a chance to hear our takeaways, hear what the research said, hear what the learners say. Now we're going to ask you to use the chat to apply it. So we have two scenarios and we're going to have people respond in the chat. And so the first scenario is a teacher hiring committee, where you are on a hiring committee for a beginning English teacher. And the committee is debating between two candidates who both have recently graduated from a local university with a master's in ESL. So candidate one is a native English speaker from Minnesota. Candidate two is originally from Thailand and moved to Minnesota at the age of 20. One of your colleagues on the hiring committee expresses their concern that learners will have a hard time understanding candidates' true accent and says, most English learners prefer teachers that are native speakers because they're better at modeling correct pronunciation. So what we would really like to hear is, based on what you've learned so far in the session, how would you respond to this? What would you say? I love our first response. Hire both. All right, and then seeing from Maya, you know, that claim is actually not supported by research. Or talking about candidate 2 might be a better choice because of what we've discussed, because of the research. I like this saying, research shows the climate of the classroom is more important than the accent of a teacher or volunteer. They're likely both great candidates. I like Susan's, not necessarily true. I think we should look at other factors to determine who is the better choice. Experience, you know, and what else can we do to find out what they have? Could we ask them to send a sample lesson plan? Yeah, so they might not necessarily be better at modeling pronunciation. However, something I got to tell you, they might be better at teaching it, because if you have learned and gone through instruction on how to pronounce things in English, you might have a better, and again, might, I think is what Justyna lifted up, the word Justyna lifted up earlier, just have a better grasp of how pronunciation works than a native speaker who's maybe never thought of it.
I really like what Liz wrote. Actual learners appreciate having both native and non-native teachers. Teachers appreciate students who understand their struggle and they break down the language in clear ways. Yes, definitely learners appreciate both. That is for sure. Mm-hmm.
All right, so lots of great responses, and I'm, you know, something I'm seeing kind of rise up is that, you know, we have to hire the person who has the best qualifications and experience, and not focus on the accent if they're both equally qualified. Okay. Anything else, Justyna, you want to add from what we're seeing? Lots of really wonderful responses coming up in the chat.
Yeah, they're very good responses. Sometimes people just say, I don't know, I would just, I don't answer. Sometimes, and non-native English speakers understand where students are confused better than the native English speakers and can explain simply and clearly. Yes, I would agree with that in many cases for sure. I like.
Oh, go ahead.
The candidate from Thailand might have insights from their own experience that would benefit the students. It's kind of like the idea that the people who struggled to learn math make better math teachers than math. Yeah, that's a very interesting comment. I like that. Yes.
Yeah, I was actually looking at that one too. And thinking about how it can be really hard to learn math from somebody who's like, oh, this is just so easy. This is just how you do it. As opposed to someone who's like, no, this is really hard. Here are the tricks that I learned. And here's how I memorized these formulas. All right, so one last thing before we move on to our next scenario. I appreciate what Linda said, saying it might be will probably be the native speaking teachers who have trouble with the accent of candidate 2. And interacting with them. So maybe like gently pointing out, are you sure that you aren't projecting your own discomfort or your own concerns with not being able to, feeling like you might not be able to easily understand a colleague? All right, and Susan, I see a really good question. I'm going to go ahead and put up the next scenario, and then Justyna and I can respond to that. And I know we didn't have a chance, we're not going to have a chance in the next one to lift up all of the great comments, but do please, you who are listening at home, read through them, because there's just some really great language and points that if you're ever in a similar situation, just having some ideas in the back, kind of in your back pocket of what you could pull out to push back, to make people think a little bit about where is that assumption coming from. And not saying for this example, you're going to definitely go with one or the other, but let's make sure we're doing an honest assessment and not, again, projecting some of those unconscious biases. All right, so scenario 2, and this is a volunteer scenario where you have Amina, a new volunteer, joins your class for a semester of service learning work. She's a fluent non-native speaker of English, and the learners seem to enjoy working with her. After a couple of weeks, Amina asks if she can speak to you after class. She tells you she's concerned because English isn't her first language. She's a poor example for language learners. So what would you say in response to this? All right, so I'm seeing our first response is build her confidence, or show her this recording.
I love that one.
And then maybe get curious, where is this concern coming from? Is this something that a learner has said? Is this something that you've heard, or is this kind of your own personal fear? Because you might address it differently depending on that.
Yeah, and I really like Kelly's response, highlight the great things you are seeing her do in the classroom and share the data presented earlier. Yes, that's something that will build her confidence and grow as well.
And I see a few people pointing out that you can refer back to research, and then highlight those qualities, or what a good example she is as somebody who successfully learned English and is now a fluent speaker. And I see pointing to the, when we're doing observations, we're always kind of looking at how do learners respond? Well, what I see is that learners really enjoy working with you. And then that I see just focus on what she contributes to the class.
And also, Liz, you're a great example of someone who has learned and succeeded in English. That is true, definitely. That would be a great encouragement for her as well.
All right, and I really want to lift up what Tu is saying. Ask her if there are specific things that make her feel this way, and don't just dismiss her concern offhand. The insecurity is real, don't dismiss it. Thank you. Yeah, so that's something that I hadn't even really thought about too. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, that when somebody just saying, oh no, it's fine, somebody who feels insecure, that might not actually make them feel better because it feels like they're not being heard. Understandably can feel like they're not being heard. So getting curious, asking some questions, pointing out some research, and then what people said, referring back to here's what I've seen, here's what I've actually seen, and here's what I see from the learners when they're working with you.
Yes, I really like this response of her. If there are specific things that make her feel this way, don't dismiss her concern offhand. The insecurity is a real thing. Don't dismiss it. And I definitely agree with it, because they're non-native English teachers or volunteers. They are aware of that fact that the English is not their first language, and they are aware of their flaws. So hearing from someone, from a colleague, that yes, that's true, but we need you the way you are because you bring other things to the table. You contribute other things for the students.
Exactly. Thank you. All right, so we are going to move on to the final part, which is providing support. And then at this point, we're going to respond back to some Susan WB's question above and talking about ways that we can be, as teachers and administrators, supporting non-native English speaking teachers.
So I will be sharing a little bit from my experience on the topic, and also I will be sharing a little bit from what I've learned last year when I led the affinity group during Summer Institute. And the affinity group was actually for non-native English speaking professionals. So there were teachers, volunteers, and also people who worked in administration. And there were some very common topics that we shared together and some common struggles. And I would like to address some of these. So so non-native English speaking teachers don't always feel that they are of the same value as native English speaking teachers. And of course, because they are aware of their flaws and they are aware of the fact that their English is accented, that they may not have the perfect pronunciation. They may sometimes look up a word in dictionary or check the spelling of something, and that's not, because they're also English learners. But also it's hard for them to feel of the same value, especially when they're treated more like students than like colleagues by people that we work with, especially when they're corrected, and that actually kind of maybe steals their confidence and takes away the motivation to become a better teacher, because they may feel like, oh, maybe I should not be in this field because I've been corrected so many times in of my English and my pronunciation or my spelling in email. So maybe it's just not something for me. So so that's a very, I think, important issue for the teachers to be aware. I personally had amazing experience working in a team with colleagues who really accepted me the way I am, and I was being of a part of team that supported me, encouraged, they pushed me, of course, as well. But the most important part that I knew I was accepted as part of the team, and I was not less than my colleagues. I was not of less value to the team. And because I knew that I was accepted the way I was, and I, being as a non-native English speaking teacher, that gave me the confidence actually to step up more, to take up more responsibilities, to push myself more, to challenge myself and to grow as a teacher. So I was very lucky to be part of this kind of team, because I was working full time.
All right, so we are going to kind of zip through our last few slides, but we wanted to end with some recommendations. So first off, what can teachers do? So making sure that we're not just addressing this with ourselves, which is obviously the first place that we want to start. Also being sure that we're talking about research, pushing back against colleagues if we hear that native speakerism are arising, and also push back against students. So having open, honest discussions with learners, that a good language teacher is not dependent on nationality. And that every teacher, somebody who has been hired to the program, was hired because of their ability and their qualifications. And all teachers are going to bring equal ability and qualifications, and there's going to be something to learn from everyone. And Justyna, do you want to talk about points 2 and 3?
Yes, of course. So yes, bring volunteers and guest speakers who speak a variety of Englishes, and that That is a great point. I remember when I taught in a classroom and I had a volunteer actually who spoke the same language as the majority of my students. And that was amazing because this volunteer was able to help me to provide instruction to the students. I was the beginning class, and this volunteer just filled out pretty much what I wasn't able to tell the students and explain the instruction quite well, so the students can follow what was happening in the classroom without feeling like they are not getting something. Maybe they don't understand something, and it's barriers between me and them. So that was very important. Also using online videos and recordings to provide systematic exposure to word Englishes. I remember when I was teaching speaking and listening class online, and I really liked the website ELLO, where there are videos of different people, students, English learners who speak English with different accents. They're from all around the world. And my students loved that. They were asking for more of these videos because they said it helps them practice their speaking and listening, actually, when they hear people speak English with different accents.
All right, and see, we're at time, so we're going to just fly through these last slides. But remember that non-native English speakers and teachers are colleagues, not learners. So just reminding people that there are things administrators can do as well, providing all teachers with the professional development and support they need, and remembering that not all needs are going to be the same. Teacher recruitment, like we talked about before, should be based on educational credentials, not the nationality or the birthplace of the applicants, and shift the emphasis in the hiring policy from who the job candidates are to what they are, qualified English teachers. And then final slide, something else that administrators and teachers can do is make a clear statement about the school's commitment to language diversity and zero tolerance of linguicism. So this is an example from the Neighborhood House ABE program, talking about how all varieties of English are legitimate, despite kind of aside from accent, nationality, background. But what's really important is teaching students how to use the variations of language to achieve their goals. So thanks to the Neighborhood House program for sharing that. And then just letting people know that there are links in our slides that you'll be able to access, and a PDF of this has already been uploaded to this site. If there are some additional resources that you would like to take a look at, including, as Justyna mentioned, the ELLO.org website, and then some articles, including one that I'd really like to give a shout out to is this How to Tackle Native Speakerism, the 4 Levels of Change, and then 2 other more researchy articles that people might be interested in. All right, so just a huge thanks to everybody for joining us. Thank you so much for being here. And huge thanks to Janae and to Patsy and Mariah for hosting and for interpreting. We really appreciate you. And of course, to my fabulous colleague, Justyna.
And thank you, Andrea.
Great. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Justyna. We appreciate your work. I'll go ahead and stop the recording now. And there's a keynote address at 2 o'clock from Dr. Ellen Beatty that you will want to catch. So you have a little bit of time before that. Thanks, everyone.